Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a Watchman Newscast Livestream. I always look forward to our live streams every week. One solid hour, of some give and take, some analysis, some commentary, but the key, give and take, where this is more conversational here. Yes, it's a report on what's going on in the world's most chaotic and volatile region, the Middle East, but you get a chance to ask me questions. I'm monitoring your chat, which is kind of on the side of my laptop here. If you see me look off to the side, that's what I'm looking at. So this is cool. And I'm able to interact with you from around the world. So this is why I love the live streams. Yeah, there's some banter here and there, but it's a little looser. It's a little more conversational than the usual newscast every day where we try not to go over 12 minutes and it's tight. We're getting it all in there. We can let it flow a little bit today, which is nice. It's a nice spring day, May 18th. So let's have a good conversation here. We're going to go again for a solid hour, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. We already have people checking in. We will have thousands today. Already we have people from around the world. As always, we've got Africa, we've got Europe, we've got the United States, of course. In my backyard, we've got the Netherlands. This is fun. This is why I love the live stream so much, because I really get a chance to see India we have right now. I really get a chance to see who we're reaching and who God is enabling us to reach. So very fun. Welcome, everyone. Shalom to everyone as well. Let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. Just in prepping for the live stream, I listed about 5 topics that I really want to hit on. Now, of course, if you saw the title of this live stream in the thumbnail, it was Israel simulates an attack on Iran, in particular on Iran's nuclear facilities. We have to talk about that. We also have to talk about the increasing tensions, and this seems to be a theme on every live stream, the increasing tensions between Israel and Russia and the prophetic implications. If you missed the newscast yesterday or Monday, check them out, folks, here in our archives. Just go right under newscast, and you'll want to see what we're getting into about Russia potentially shooting or firing anti-aircraft missiles at Israeli fighter jets over Syria. Call me crazy. That's kind of a big deal. And that's a major story. We will talk about that. Also, have you heard about Iran's new drone factory? And it's not in Iran. It's not in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, or Gaza, or even Yemen either. We're going to talk about that. An interesting, potentially a prophetic wrinkle there as well, the location of this new drone factory. Also, Hezbollah taking lumps in the Lebanon parliamentary elections. Doesn't really affect things big picture, folks. It might be, it's a good thing whenever Hezbollah doesn't gain seats and gain further clout in Lebanon's government, but unfortunately, Hezbollah remains the most powerful force in that country. We've got a lot to talk about. Have you noticed? I'm also going to share a little bit later an experience I had over the weekend, which I think you'll find very interesting. And I hope that you'll find encouraging. This one will be, and I won't take too long before our Q&A. And remember, send your questions along, please, because we're going Q&A last 20 minutes or so. But right before the Q&A, perhaps I'll hit on it after we get all of our hard news out of the way here. But this is one I think will encourage people who are estranged. What does that mean, estranged? Well, it means you have not talked to a family member, a friend, a loved one, perhaps for weeks, perhaps for years, perhaps for months. There was a fallout, there was a falling out, a disagreement. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, just for the times we are living in right now. Hey, folks, if you're watching this right now and you're here on the live stream, I got news for you that you probably know already. Time is short and life is too short, as they say, to be not speaking to the ones you love. And we'll talk about that a bit. I had a really interesting experience with that over the weekend that I want to share with you, and I hope it'll encourage you, and perhaps it will even be a call to action. Okay, let's get into it. Israel. I want to quote right from this article directly. This was published across multiple outlets. Newsweek here has it as well. Listen up. We've been talking about this for months, not months, years now on the newscast. The Israel Defense Forces will conduct a simulated airstrike on Iran during a month-long military drill that begins at the end of May. Now, we've talked about this here in the newscast. Awesome name for this military drill. Chariots of Fire is the name of this drill. Gotta love it. And of course, I said on the live stream last week, it brings to mind the film, of course, which is a great film, by the way, but also Elijah taken up to heaven, the prophet Elijah, in the ultimate horse-drawn carriage, a horse-drawn chariot in a burst of flame and fire. So Chariots of Fire, the simulation, it's the largest, as we shared with you last week. I honestly, folks, thought this thing was starting sooner, and I reported that on the newscast, so I guess I'm correcting myself here. Now, apparently it's starting at the end of May. We're reading here. I reported last week here in the newscast that this thing was getting underway. Perhaps they delayed it. But this is the largest military drill, as we did report, in Israel's history, with thousands of soldiers and reservists taking part. Almost all units of the IDF will participate in the month-long maneuvers scheduled to start on May 29th. And key point here, now I'm just reading off my phone. Pardon me, that's why I'm looking down. The drill will include a simulated attack on Iranian nuclear targets. And the final week of the exercise will take place in Cyprus. The Times of Israel reports that a reason for the drill is that Israel wants to be prepared in case of stalled negotiations, and if the negotiations fail between the U.S. and Iran over that nuclear program, basically the Iran nuclear deal. Israel's ready for this thing to fall through. But folks, here's the thing. Israel's also ready and preparing in case this thing becomes a reality once again. Either way, I'm not going to say either way Israel loses. Either way, the world loses. Look at it this way when it comes to Iran's nuclear program, and more on the drill in a minute, but here's the backdrop to it. Number one, say the deal goes through, and right now it looks unlikely, but stranger things have happened, and European leaders and the Biden administration are determined to revive this Iran deal. Know that. That's number one. So yes, it looks like it's on life support right now. The main sticking point is that the United States, rightly, does not want to remove Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps from the terror blacklist. Iran saying, remove them or we're out of here. If I was the U.S., I would say, take a short walk off a long pier or a long walk off a short pier, the old saying. That's what I would tell the Iranian negotiators. Go pound sand. We're done. We're walking away. We should have never come to the table in the first place, but I digress. But the Biden administration so far has stuck to its guns, and they have maintained the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps on that terror blacklist. But folks, there are little detours and end arounds, and reportedly the Biden administration and some people close to it are saying, okay, maybe we don't remove certain elements of the IRGC. That's the acronym, by the way, for the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC. Perhaps we remove the IRGC from the list, but we keep certain elements of the IRGC, like, for example, the Quds Force on the list. Now, who is the Quds Force? They are the most radical in a very radical IRGC, the most radical faction. Qasem Soleimani, the not so dearly departed terror kingpin, who was eliminated in January 2020 by a U.S. drone, he led the Quds Force. They are in charge of Iran's external terror operations around the world, but in particular in the region, in the Middle East, in Iran's backyard. Think Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. That's the Quds Force's fingerprints. So the Biden administration saying, hey, we'll keep them on the list, but we'll remove the IRGC writ large. At least that is how the conversation has been going, according to various reports. We shall see. But say the deal goes down once again. Say they're able to get over this hurdle of the IRGC somehow, and the deal is forged once again. That means that Iran's nuclear program is delayed. What do I mean by that? Remember, when President Trump pulled out of that deal, rightly, in 2018, they were about 3 years into it. It's a 10-year deal. 3 years into a 10-year deal. 4 years have passed since he pulled out. So we are 7 years into the Iran nuclear deal. So if you sign it now, unless there is, and hey, Justin Ham, I'm just seeing here, welcome. He is a Watchman Premium member now. Awesome. More on that in a minute. Welcome, Justin, and thank you. Okay, 3 years left in the deal. Unless there is some kind of revision or supplement to the deal where it says we're going to extend this thing another additional 5 years to stretch it out. Hey, folks, you're looking at 2.5, 3 years. That's it. And then the deal runs out. The sun sets, as they say, on the deal. And then Iran is free to do what it wants. Have you ever heard the phrase, I think I got long walk off a short pier wrong a minute ago. I apologize. I've shown my age, I guess. But this is, I had another one in mind, another saying. I just drew a blank on it, but it's bad news. Kicking the can down the road. That's what I was going to say. It's been a long day. You're kicking the can down the road with the Iran nuclear deal. Just 2.5 years. That's it. And then what? Iran breaks out. And how close are they to breakout time? Folks, I was just in Israel. I returned 2 weeks ago. You know that if you're watching here in the newscast. I was in Bahrain, in the UAE, and in Israel. And I was hearing on the ground in Israel that Iran may be 5 days, less than a week, from being able to break out and have the bomb. Now, I don't know, personally, I don't know how you can gauge 5 days, 6 days. That seems difficult for me to whittle it down to a certain amount of days. When you say about a month away or 3 weeks or a year away, 6 months away, that's a little more easier to digest, I guess. But how do you know 5 days down to the day? Interesting. I hope they're wrong. That's my bottom line, because that's a nightmare scenario. But that was a number thrown out there in one of my meetings, off the record meeting. So I can't divulge much more about it. But that number was thrown out there. We're hearing Benny Gantz this week, the defense minister of Israel, say that, look, Iran is very, very close. And he made a great point that better to take care of Iran's nuclear program now than a year down the road. Because if you're Israel and you wait, the breakout may happen. You may wake up one morning, look on your phone, turn on Fox News, and you may see the headline, Iran tests a nuclear device, or Iran announces they have the bomb, or Iran announces they are a nuclear power. And then things become a whole lot more difficult for Israel and for the world to deal with that program. So with the Iran, and Gantz made the point, by the way, very important speech, made the point, hey, we're going to do this alone if we have to. We need to be able to defend ourselves by ourselves. And that's it. And guess what? They may have to very soon. Now, again, I said it's you lose either way, right? The deal goes through. All it does is kick the can down the road for like 2 years. That's it. And then you have to deal with it again. Unless, again, there is some kind of supplement where it's extended 5 years. Okay, say it's extended 5 years. Then you're just kicking the can down the road for 7 years. And you're going to have to deal with it at the end of 7 years. Folks, you're delaying the inevitable here. This does nothing. And I've posed this question. I'll pose it again. If you can, please leave it in our comments. Perhaps we can talk about it in the Q&A. Name me one thing, one benefit that the United States gains from the Iran nuclear deal. One, please. Because all I see is when it comes to the nuclear program, just delaying it a little bit, number one. Number two, Iran's ballistic missile program, not on the table, including those precision-guided missiles we talk so much about. Number three, Iran's sponsorship for terrorism in the region is not on the table. What does America get? Oh, and by the way, the United States releases billions, tens of billions of dollars in sanctions relief to the Iranian regime, the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. It's not me saying that. The United States State Department identifies them as such, even under Democrat administrations. That designation has not been lifted. Iran is recognized by the United States as the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. And yet, the Biden administration would readily reward the mullahs in Tehran with billions of dollars in sanctions relief. Make no mistake about it. They've made clear this, as Iranian proxies continue to attack U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria, this, as the Iranian regime, according to the Biden administration, Secretary of State Antony Blinken just testified this last month, the Iranian regime is targeting Trump administration officials for assassination, including former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Brian Hook, who was an advisor to Pompeo on Iran at the State Department, and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Jeremy, welcome to the Watchman membership. Someone else just became a premium member. Now that we're talking about that, Jeremy, welcome and thank you. Real quick, I mentioned, if you want to become a premium member here on the newscast, just go to join. You don't have to do it. You can still watch every single day completely free. Okay, just want to make that clear. But if you want to become a premium member, we have some cool offers and some special perks for you, including an exclusive first look every week at each new Watchman episode featuring some behind-the-scenes commentary from yours truly. So if you want to watch, if you want to do that and get some extra perks as well, just go to join here on the homepage. And also, you're helping us to stay on the air. You're helping to support the channel. It's not free, unfortunately. I wish it was free. I could just do this and it didn't cost me a cent. It costs a little bit. So it's good to have your support and to have you help us get the message out for such a time as this. Okay, welcome to those new premium members. Back to Iran. Okay, that's, if the deal goes down, that's what you're facing. And you wonder why Israel is simulating an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities in this but this drill, Chariots of Fire. There's not much more I can unpack there. It's the largest military drill in Israel's history. It involves literally every unit of the Israel Defense Forces, and it's about to happen for such a time as this. Do you really think the timing is a coincidence, folks? Do you really think it is a coincidence that Israel has had these civilian preparedness drills as well in the north in particular, where Hezbollah lives and breathes? Hey, we've talked about the Great Northern War, right? Here on the newscast. It is coming. It sounds like a battle out of Game of Thrones, but it's all too real. I call it the Great Northern War, where Israel will be forced to face off against Iran and its proxies in Syria and in Lebanon. The battle to the north. The threat will come from the north, with plenty of backup, unfortunately, from the south in the form of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza and the Houthis in Yemen, and from the east in the form of those Shia militias in Iraq, and also Iran itself, with the ability to reach Israel with ballistic missiles. But the big battle will be to the north, the Great Northern War. I believe that is a battle that will come before the war of Gog and Magog, just to throw it out there, because when I've talked about the Great Northern War again, and that's just my moniker for it, people have said, is that the Ezekiel War? No, it's not. I believe it is a precursor to the Ezekiel War. I believe you have Isaiah 17, the demise of Damascus in that mix. Many have discussed Psalm 83 here. And I have to say, folks, that is one that I have studied, and tough to say if that is yet to be fulfilled or if it was fulfilled in 1948 or 1967, as some believe. Psalm 83 is a little trickier. So that is one that could potentially come before Ezekiel 38, 39 as well. I won't etch that one in stone. I know the war of Gog and Magog is coming, because that is coming in the latter days. It's not me saying it. That's God saying it through Ezekiel, pen to the paper. That's in there. Psalm 83 is a little, I don't want to say a little bit more ambiguous, but I guess you could use that word. It's not clear the timeline of Psalm 83. Certainly, there's a good chance it could be yet to come. No doubt. It could have been 48 or 67 as well. It's interesting because when you look at the nation's name there, they kind of match up with 67 and 48, right? So you could say, well, that might have happened already. The coalition mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39, however, in my view, is unprecedented. We haven't seen that kind of coalition with those nations led by Russia together. So that's why it's easy to relatively, I don't want to say easy, but it's all in there. Ezekiel 38 and 39, you can figure out, have a good idea who these nations are that will come against Israel. And what I should say, when they'll come against Israel. You can't get around that phrase. The latter days, after God has brought the people of Israel back to their ancient and ancestral land, that is when that war of Gog and Magog will unfold. Quick mention, if Iran, okay, we covered, okay, if the deal goes down, but what if the deal doesn't go down? Okay, you're not kicking the can down the road. Maybe it's 2 months instead of 2 years where they break out and go nuclear. Again, you're delaying the inevitable. And you're not going to, okay, I talked to let's just say a former Democrat, U.S. Democrat official when I was in Israel last month. And the way he framed it was, look, the Iran nuclear deal, from a Western perspective, and I asked, what do we get out of this? If you're in the West, or if you're anywhere in the free world, you don't have to be in the West. We're all threatened by a nuclear Iran. He said, look, it gives us time. Time to do what? Time to do what exactly? Time to get a military plan together? Hey, look, I can tell you, folks, the Biden administration is not going to use military force against Iran. They're not going to do it. It's going to fall to Israel. The Obama administration wasn't going to use military force either. Buys you time to do what? Nothing. Basically, it buys you time. It buys you maybe another 2 years of attending fancy cocktail parties inside the Washington Beltway without a worry in the world. That's what it buys you. But it's coming. The gathering storm is coming once that deal runs out. If there is no deal, the storm is here now. Even closer, perhaps, unless Israel says, you know what, we have to take care of this. As Benny Gantz said the other day, the Israeli defense minister, I believe it was yesterday, he gave that speech. Better to deal with it now than to wait for this thing to fester even more and grow, and for Iran to grow in strength. Do you sense a pattern here? I think you do. Either way you slice it, Israel, I believe, is going to be forced to take military action against Iran's nuclear facilities. I don't see any way around it, unless, and this is a possibility, unless Israel, other than a large-scale military operation, is able to set back that nuclear program for years using some sort of sabotage. Now, we've discussed here in the newscast many times over the past several months, really, I should say over the past 2 years, Israel's repeated sabotage operations against Iran's nuclear weapons and ballistic missile facilities. They have set them back, but Iran has been relentless with this nuclear program, and it hasn't set them back years or decades, which would be the preferred outcome. Set them back maybe a few years, maybe several months, but then they're right back at it. So can sabotage ultimately get you to the place? I mean, if you're Israel, you want to be in the place where you don't have to worry about Iran's nuclear program for at least years, at least 5 to 10, 20, 30, at least. Preferably never again would you have to worry about it. But, if you're setting it back a year, that's great. Any setback, even a day having it set back is good. But can sabotage get you where you need to be, where you have peace of mind if you're Israel? I don't think it can, ultimately. I think the only thing that would be, to be very blunt, to flatten those facilities. But folks, it's a tough go. Those facilities are hardened, and many of them are deep underground. And the U.S. has been reluctant to sell bunker-busting bombs to Israel. Now, surprise. Now, interesting, apparently the U.S. in this Chariots of Fire drill, U.S. refueling planes will be involved in this drill, allowing Israel, look, if you're going to Iran, that's quite a distance from Israel, well over 1,000 miles, you're going to need to refuel if you're Israeli fighter jets. So U.S. refueling planes would be great if Israel could get help from America and help getting refueled before continuing on to the ultimate target, Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, the U.S. is participating in this drill in that regard. But folks, when the rubber hits the road, what will they do? Where will those refueling planes be? When the rubber hits the road and the operation's actually going down, the Biden administration may say, we want to be very scant and nowhere to be found. Israel, you're on your own. Would anyone watching right now really be surprised by that? So this is where we're at. Either way, we are on a collision course. I see in comments now, someone says Israel does not want to wipe anyone off the map. That's true. I'm just glancing at our comments on the side. That's true. Israel doesn't want to wipe anyone off the map, but they want to wipe Iran's nuclear facilities off the map. Yes, absolutely. Because those nuclear facilities, if they become operational, or if those weapons become operational, facilities are already operational. If the weapons become operational, guess what? They will be used to wipe Israel off the map. It's elementary. You know, I saw some comments yesterday, actually several. The title was, let's segue into Russia a bit here because we've got some developments there. The title was something along the lines of, Russia fires at Israeli jets over Syria. They were flying over Syria when they were fired at by Russia, reportedly. Hold on, we'll get into it in a second. But a few people commented, more than a few. We get some anti-Israel trolls on here from time to time, but more than a few commented, what are Israeli fighter jets doing over Syria anyway? They shouldn't even be there. No, the question you should be asking, my dear friends, is what are Iran and Hezbollah doing in Syria? Because if they weren't there, Israeli fighter jets would not be either. The reason Israeli fighter jets are over Syria is not because they are trying to conquer Syria or violate Syria's airspace in some malicious way. No, Israeli fighter jets and Israeli surface-to-surface missiles have been over Syria for the past several years now for one reason and one reason only. Actually, for two reasons. Number one, because Iran and Hezbollah, which are devoted to wiping Israel off the map, they are in Syria. They are in Syria at Israel's doorstep, and they're trying to transit advanced weapons to Israel's doorstep to be used against Israel. So Israeli fighter jets, yes, have gone over Syria to destroy those weapons that are seeking to destroy them. That's number one. And number two, which is linked to number one, Iran and Hezbollah, which again, it's not me just saying this. Listen to what they say. What I do, folks, is not brain surgery. I simply listen to what Iran and Hezbollah's various leaders and ideologues say. And I am quoting them directly. They say, we want to destroy Israel. We want to wipe the Zionist entity off the map. Call me crazy, but if people who are saying those sorts of things are actually shaping policies around those sorts of comments and trying to make them a reality, and now they're a few hundred miles from your border, you might want to do something about it. It's just a wild thought. I don't know where you live in the world right now. We have viewers from around the world, and I love it. From every continent. We've got some penguins in Antarctica watching right now, and I love it. And I appreciate you all so much. I really do. It's not a cliche. I love you guys. And that's why I love the live streams, because it's a conversation. I'm looking at your comments. I'm making comments. We'll do the Q&A. It's fun. It's fun that we can do this in 2022. It's not some newsreader talking at you the whole time, reading from a script. We're just going. We're having a conversation. It's great. But no matter where you live in the world, what would you do? Or what would you want your government to do if you had a terrorist organization not even 100 miles from your border? I mean, we're talking 10, 15, right across the border in Syria, in certain areas, that was trying to stockpile weapons to be used against you and your kids and your grandkids. What would you do? Or again, what would your government, what would you want your government to do? You might want some quote unquote jets over that country, I might say, looking to protect you and the ones you love. Wow. Israel is held to a different standard, an impossible, insane standard. Someone just wrote, I just got here. Can we start over? John Klein. John, don't worry. The entire live stream, I'm glad you brought that up. The entire live stream will be posted as soon as I am done. You can watch it from the beginning as soon as we're done here. We've got an active chat going on here. I can see some good stuff going on, some give and take. That's good. Save it for the Q&A too. But let's talk Russia. What is Russia doing in Syria, by the way? We know what they're doing in Syria. Russia came down there in September 2015 to bail out their good buddy, Bashar al-Assad. And he prevailed in that civil war, and now Russia is there to stay, although, as we reported last week here in the newscast, reportedly a chunk of Russia's forces in Syria have turned back north to go fight in Ukraine. And how refreshing, how pleasant to know that they left behind some of the bases they were manning to be manned by Iran. I'm sure that's a comforting thought for Israel right now. And believe me, Russia is, some may be gone, but they're not gone for good. And the Ezekiel factor factors in very strongly there. But the big report this week, and we talked about it yesterday and Monday, let's set the scene. Last Friday night, May 13th, Israel carried out a pretty major air raid, I would call it, airstrikes in northwestern Syria around the town or the region of Masayaf. Now, in that region, there is an underground facility that has apparently been destroyed several times. And it was destroyed completely once again on Friday night, May 13th, according to an Israeli company called ImageSat International. They provided the satellite images to the media. And this site was flattened. It was an underground site. Now, apparently, the site that was destroyed was an entranceway, according to reports out of the Middle East, that led into a network of tunnels controlled by Iran and Iranian-backed militias. It's never good, right? Let me repeat that. It led into a network of underground tunnels controlled by Iran. Yeah, it sounds like the kind of site you'd probably want to take out if you were Israel. And that's what they did. And apparently the tunnels may have led to a chemical research center. What a refreshing, comforting thought as well. So Israel acted. Syrian military forces fired anti-aircraft fire at the Israeli fighter jets. They missed, of course. But I reported this on Monday at first here in the newscast. After we posted, unfortunately, a new wrinkle came out to the story, and we talked about this in depth yesterday. Apparently, Russia fired Russian forces in Syria, fired the S-300 anti-aircraft missile system at those Israeli fighter jets. Now, the S-300 can only be manned by Russian forces. Syrian forces, the forces of Bashar al-Assad, are not permitted to lay their hands on that S-300 system. Only Russians can do it. And the reports are, Channel 13 in Israel reported that Russia did indeed do just that and fired anti-aircraft missiles at Israeli fighter jets. They were unable to lock in on the jets. They missed, thankfully. Neither Israel nor Russia has confirmed this, but wow. Folks, could this be a turning point if it is indeed true? Now, perhaps it was just Russia saying, Israel, we're getting sick of this. Perhaps Russia missed on purpose, but they were just sending a message. That's a possibility. Or perhaps Vladimir Putin is saying enough is enough. It's a new day. This is how it's going to be. Things have become very tense between Israel and Russia, as we've been reporting consistently here on the newscast over the past several weeks. So this set off alarm bells for sure. It would be nice to get some additional confirmation. Channel 13, a credible source from everything I can gather. But it would be nice to get, obviously, some secondary sources as well, confirming, hey, yeah, this was Russia. They fired the S-300. And get some comment. Israel, what do you think of this? And Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov and various Russian military officials, Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, well, why would you do this? You've got this supposed deconfliction mechanism, as they call it, between Russia and Israel, where there's this understanding where Israel gives Russia fair warning, hey, we're coming in, we're going to hit Iran in Syria, just kind of stay out of the way. We don't want to have any accidents where we accidentally fire at Russian soldiers. or Russian assets in Syria. Israeli officials, both current and former, that I've interviewed have said it's worked. And they've seemed confident. No, Russia, they're never going to turn on us. Folks, there is a great betrayal coming. A day is coming where Russia will indeed turn against Israel. I hate to say that. I love the people of, I don't like the regime in Russia. I don't like Vladimir Putin, obviously, as I've made very clear for good reasons here in the newscast. But the Russian people are great people. And there's no animosity between the people of Russia and the people of Israel. In fact, there's at least 1 million Russian Jews living in Israel now. After the wall fell, they immigrated to Israel. They're a vibrant part of the country. So you'd hate to see relations go sour between Russia and Israel, but that's out of Israel's control. The ball is in Putin's court, and the regime there's court. And it is a regime. If Vladimir Putin is in charge, it's a regime. He's a dictator. And he can't be trusted when it comes to Israel. Will he be and Samantha Vance, welcome, Samantha. She just became a Watchman Premium member. Samantha, welcome. Thank you. We appreciate it. God bless you. Will Putin lead this invasion force against Israel? The great betrayal is coming. Eventually, it will be a diplomatic butting of heads, and we're seeing the seeds of that lane right now. But a day is coming eventually where Russia will make its move with a confederation. I believe it will head a confederation. Some people have commented, no, it's going to be Turkey. I believe it will be Russia, and Turkey will be part of it. Speaking of Turkey, if you've seen Finland, we have a few more quick things, and we're getting questions. Finland and Sweden, have you been following this? Joining NATO? There's kind of a hiccup here. Recep Erdogan, the radical Islamist Muslim Brotherhood president of Turkey, is stomping his feet and saying, no, I don't want Finland and Sweden to join NATO. Remember, Turkey is a NATO member, although in my view, under Erdogan's leadership, they are more like NATO in name only. Erdogan is pitching a fit, and hey, there's 30 NATO member nations, and they have to agree in unison to allow new members in. Erdogan is not playing ball right now. He's accusing Finland and Sweden of supporting Kurdish terrorists, anti-Turkish Kurdish terrorists. And that's where we're at. So will Finland and Sweden get in? Will Erdogan kind of climb off the ledge and say, okay, we'll let them in? What's he going to want for it? That's probably the big question, right? What does he want to get out of this? Does he just want to project strength and play the spoiler? Does he want some kind of economic incentives? Hey, talk about inflation here in the United States. In Turkey, it's a whole other level of horrific right now with inflation. The economy is struggling and gasping, and that's why you see Erdogan conducting outreach to Israel, to the UAE, to Egypt. All of a sudden, he's making nice with Israel and the Sunni Arab nations. But is Erdogan going to play spoiler here when it comes to Finland and Sweden? Is he throwing Russia a bone? Look, that relationship has not been perfect, Russia and Turkey. They've butted heads over the past few years on certain things, including on Ukraine. Erdogan has kind of played both sides a little bit, and he's just trying to angle himself and be a global player and a power broker. But maybe he's throwing Putin a bone here and saying, no, NATO won't expand anymore. Finland shares a border with Russia of over 800 miles, by the way. So the plot thickens. Another thing I wanted to mention, two other quick. I think we mentioned Hezbollah in the Lebanon elections. Great that Hezbollah didn't make any advances, but doesn't really change the situation on the ground where they are the ultimate power broker in southern Lebanon. Last thing to mention, I teased it at the beginning. Iran's new drone factory. Last thing, by the way, before we get a Q&A. Iran's drone factory, we'll quote directly real quick. Where is it? Has anyone guessed yet? Gaza, Yemen, Iraq, Syria. That's what you'd expect, right? Try Tajikistan. Iran announced the production of a new military drone in Tajikistan. It's the Ababil 2. That's what they're calling it. Iran says it can carry out attacks, this drone, from a range of 200 kilometers. I'm terrible with math. Tell me what that is in miles, 200 kilometers. It's seen as an effort to balance power in the region. I'm sure just balancing power. That's all we're doing. And Tajikistan is allowing them to manufacture it in Tajikistan. And it's interesting because the leader of Tajikistan, was just meeting with Vladimir Putin as well. And I mentioned at the beginning, prophetic implications. Many believe in that Gog-Magog invasion force, the stands, I guess you would call them, may be part of that force. The former Soviet republics like a Tajikistan could join with Russia and come against Israel. So that may have some implications there as well. But you can really see the chess pieces moving, folks, and the confederation and the alliances lining up. The goats, the sheep and the goat nations, I would call them. You can really see them lining up right now. And when it comes to Iran's drone program, hey, folks, that's their bread and butter right now. They are very proud of their domestically produced drone program, very proud. And they are just rolling them off the assembly lines in Iran, and they are sharing them with their proxies throughout the region. The ring of fire that surrounds Israel that we've talked so much about here in the newscast, yes, that ring of fire is armed with ballistic missiles and rockets, but also attack drones increasingly. Hey, quick thing. Do you have your questions ready? Someone in Israel says, Toda Rabbah. Someone said 120 miles, or that is the 200 kilometers or 120 miles. Okay. Well, they have drones that can travel further than that, and they're supplying them. The thing I wanted to mention about this weekend, have your questions ready. Give me a minute and 30 seconds. All right, maybe like a minute and 35 seconds. This weekend, I was at a family get-together with cousins, aunts, uncles, some cousins I hadn't seen in a long time. Hey, I have a big family on my mom's side, Irish family on her side. My dad, German, English. My mom, Irish, 100%. Her parents arrived here from Ireland in 1920. Western Ireland, County Mayo is where my mom's family was from. I remember my grandmother had an Irish brogue, and my dad, German, English. But we had this get together, 10, big Irish family. My mom had 9 siblings, actually 10. One died when he was young. She had 10 siblings. Imagine. So 11 kids in one house, in a row house in Philadelphia. So those were the days. When I grew up, still there were big families. Where I grew up in Philly, 7 kids, 5 kids. That was no thing. We had one family, some of my dearest friends, 4 boys, and they're all, I'm 6'5". These guys were all like 6'2", 3, 4. And we want to play full court basketball. We hung out. It's called the Rec, the basketball court, the playground where we all hung out at. We need a few more guys, and these guys would just emerge over the horizon with the sun against their backs, each one taller than the next, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 6'6", and they were all brothers. Now we got a game. So we had big families like that all the time growing up in Philadelphia, but my family was one, my extended family, I should say. So we got together, and my mom passed away in 2020. My dad passed away in 2003. My cousins, basically all of our moms and dads are pretty much passed. They're in heaven right now. And we were together just reminiscing and talking and just celebrating the lives of our parents and remembering the good old, what legends they were. My uncles, they were characters. They were legends for sure. Old school Philly legends. And we were talking about it. And then a few cousins weren't there. And you come to find out that they haven't talked to their brother or their sister in years. And there's a falling out, and they're not talking 7 years, 8 years. Could you imagine not talking to your brother or sister that long? We're getting the questions in a minute, but I had to mention this because God laid this on my heart. It was just on my heart today. I feel like God wanted me to share this with you. I don't know where you're at. If you're watching out there around the world, I don't know where you're at with your family right now, but I can tell you, hey, time is too short. If you're not talking to someone in your life who has been near and dear to you, a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, a cousin, a best friend, and you can't even remember what the falling out was about, right? It was so stupid. And now it's been 5 years, 10 years. Folks, I'm telling you right now, try your best to reconnect and bury the hatchet. And I'm going to give you a personal example. My father died in 2003, as I mentioned. I speak from personal experience. My dad and his brother, my uncle, they didn't speak for 20 years. The last 20 years of my father's life, he and his brother did not speak. Stubbornness, foolishness on both sides. I don't even know if they remember what the falling out was about. They didn't speak for 20 years. And then my dad died. My dad passed away. They never had a chance to reconnect and just have that reunion and water under the bridge. My uncle came to my dad's funeral. He hadn't seen my dad in 20 years, mind you. And I will never forget the image, folks. He broke down and he wept over my dad's casket. He wept and wept over my dad's casket. The remorse he felt for never having reached out and just we're brothers, put it behind us, talk it out, get through it. And I know my dad would have felt that same remorse if his brother had died before him. I thought of that this weekend as we're talking. I'm with family, a big, wonderful family, a loving family. There are people out there, and I know people out there who are not speaking. I haven't talked to my daughter in 10 years. Sometimes there's a good reason. I'm not naive. Believe me, there's deep wounds. I get it. But man, if there is a way right now, I don't know where you're at in your life or who you've had a falling out with right now. If there is a way to make it right. And with Jesus, there's always a way. There's always a way with Jesus. If the Lord wants it to happen, he'll make it happen. Do it. Time is short. Do it. I can tell you right now, before Jesus, PJ, Erick, Stacks, pre-Jesus, I could hold a grudge better than anyone. Let me tell you, I could go months without talking to a loved one and dig in my heels. Crazy. I would say it was a family curse, a generational curse in my family on my dad's side, not talking and falling out, all that stuff. Hey, life's too short. And I could do it in a heartbeat. And then I got to tell you, once I accepted Jesus into my heart, it changed everything. That grudge stuff was over. That generational family curse was broken, at least in my family, in my immediate family. We're not doing that. But he's the only way to do that, to just break the bondage, break all that. In Jesus, you can do it. And I was able to do it. I would not have been able to do it without him. I'd still be holding a grudge now in 2022. But I'll tell you, when you get saved and you give your life to the Lord and you become a new creation in Christ and you are born again, it's amazing how some things change. Some things right away, boom, bad habits, bad behaviors disappear right away. That grudge holding stuff for me went out the window. Other things are a tougher slog, right? And you struggle with them maybe till the day you die. But for me, the grudges, that's out the window. Life's too short. And God is a God of unity, especially when it comes to families. He's a God of unity, not a God of division and bitterness and grudge holding. I just want to share that because time is short. Someone said that pride, yikes, that is so true. Stupid pride. Time is short and God hates the proud. God resists the proud. God does not like pride, a proud, haughty person who's stubborn and won't give in. So I wanted to share that with you. I was thinking about it this weekend, and I said, I'm going to share this on the live stream because, again, this is more intimate on the live stream. It's more conversational. I hope that blessed you. Maybe it spoke to someone's heart. We have thousands of people watching right now. Maybe this spoke to your heart. Okay, we got about 13 minutes left. It's a good chunk for questions. Let's get into it. Thanks for letting me share that, by the way. Let's see what we got. Questions. Let's see this. Okay. They are on Microsoft Teams, which every week I'm having trouble finding this thing, folks. Pardon me. Let's see what we got here in the chat. Here's a question from McLeod69. He asks, the Bible says that Gog will be emboldened. Wait, where'd that go? Hold on. Let me back up. Back up. Where'd that go? I had it. It was a good question. Where'd that go? I'm sorry, guys. Sorry, folks. Okay, I'm not in Teams. Let's see. Here it is. Gog, the Bible says that Gog will be emboldened and then go to make war with Israel. Could this be the current Ukraine war prior to any, could this current Ukraine war be prior basically to any day now with Israel? Definitely prior to Israel, obviously. any day now, that might be a bit of a stretch. I think things are going to have to largely sort out. And we're talking here about this, is a good question, because we're talking Gog, Magog timetable. I think things have to sort out first in Ukraine before Russia can really go all in and divert massive resources and mount a massive invasion of the Middle East, of Israel, along with its confederation. I would think that Russia has still got a ways to go in Ukraine right now, and things are not going well for them in Ukraine. And I know there'll be some pushback. Yes, they are. Don't believe it. Russia's winning. Russia certainly is making. Hey, when I say things are not going well, I say that twofold. Number one, they've lost a lot of soldiers, a lot of young men, many more than they thought they would lose. That's never good. Thousands of Russian troops killed since late February. That's not what they expected going into this, folks. Number one. Number two, has Russia really met its strategic objectives? Say to pull back from Kyiv. They wanted to seize Kyiv, obviously, the capital of Ukraine. So in that sense, it's not going that well. Serious casualties, unexpected, at an unexpected level. Low morale, some pretty credible reports of low morale among many of the troops, and major strategic objectives not met, to the point where they had to pull out of the Kyiv area and regroup. So a rocky start the past 3 months. I don't know how you can deny that if you're watching that, if you're watching what's unfolding. But Russia ultimately, folks, they've inflicted a lot of damage on Ukraine, no doubt. And can they just bludgeon Ukraine eventually into submission with Russia's superior firepower? You would think that would be the case in the long term. On the flip side, we do have Western nations. Finally, Europe awakens from a decades-long slumber and is arming Ukraine, and Ukraine is using those weapons against Russia with skill, for sure, and having success. So this thing could stretch out for a while. If NATO, if Europe are all in and arming Ukraine with advanced weapons, this thing could certainly last for a while. But Russia ultimately, you would think, would prevail. And you would think that they're going to need to sort things. I don't want to use that term, sort things out. That's not the right term. I apologize. You would think they'd need to have some sort of conclusion or closure, in their view, in Ukraine before they're able to mount something against Israel. Because they're obviously, hey, they're pulling some assets out of the Middle East right now, bringing them to Ukraine reportedly. How long will Ukraine drag on? That may also depend on something we talked about this week. And I know people don't like to hear this, but the nuclear factor. Russian officials, from Vladimir Putin to the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, to other high-ranking officials, have been waving that rattling that nuclear saber. And I don't think it's just bluster and empty threats for domestic consumption. Russia has already used hypersonic missiles in Ukraine. They can be nuclear equipped. And they have a large arsenal of tactical battlefield nukes. If Vladimir Putin feels like his back is against the wall, and right now, look, the PR for him, it looks like things are going bad. Overall, even if Russia has the upper hand and ultimately prevails, it was not a smooth campaign in Ukraine. It was not what he expected. It was not, I think, what the Russian people expected. He takes a hit here. And the other part to that is he's apparently in bad health. There's all sorts of reports circulating about cancer, chemo. His face looks puffy. He's almost 70. So if he feels his back is against the wall, and perhaps there's a coup or he could be deposed, who knows what he'll do? I don't know what's going on in his head right now. He's always been a cold, calculating guy, for sure, former KGB. But if his back is truly against the wall and he feels like he is in jeopardy, not only his leadership, but him personally, what will he do? So I think that's a big question, but that's Ukraine. You would think, number one, that Ukraine, he'll need, again, some kind of conclusion there, or at least get close to a conclusion, or have it under control in his view, before he can go south into the Middle East. His next move may be moving beyond Ukraine, honestly, into another European country, an Eastern European country, someplace like Moldova. He's even threatened Poland. There's a reason Finland and Sweden are trying to join NATO. So he could do a total swerve and go south to the Middle East. I mean, there's a lot of things on the table, but I think that the Ukraine situation for him, or whoever the leader will be in that Gog-Magog invasion, hey, I just laid out some of the drawbacks for Vladimir Putin. He may not be the one to lead that invasion that's laid out in Ezekiel 38 and 39. I would think another thing may precipitate that invasion. I mentioned earlier the Great Northern War, how I believe it's before the War of Gog and Magog. In some ways, the War of Gog and Magog, I believe, could be a war of revenge. Not revenge, well, in their view, revenge. In the evil forces' view, they're avenging. It could be a war of revenge in their view after the Great Northern War, after Israel decisively crushes Hezbollah and Hamas. Perhaps Damascus, Isaiah 17, is fulfilled. Perhaps Israel strikes Iran's nuclear facilities. And Iran is mad, and Russia is mad, and Turkey is mad. Then they assemble that confederation. It seems that there may be something before the Ezekiel war that sets things in motion, where in their view, in the Ezekiel invasion forces view, it's a war of revenge against the Zionist entity. So there, I think, that was a long answer to a good question. I think there are some more shoes to drop. Would that be, man, I'm all these old sayings I'm throwing out today. I hope I'm getting them right. The other shoe has to drop, right? A few other shoes have to drop. Okay. Got about 4 or 5 minutes left. Stick with me here. Don't leave. We got 1,000 with us. Let's see another question here. Someone says, okay, Aaron Goulet. Aaron says, and Aaron, thank you for the comment. He says that he believes Turkey will be the leader of the Ezekiel 38-39 war. Gog is the Antichrist, he says. The Antichrist will come out of the Turkey area, Daniel 8. The leader of Russia is not Gog. You know, Aaron, interesting. I don't know if you've heard of my good friend, Dalton Thomas. Aaron, have you heard of him? Frontier Alliance International. Anyone out there? No, FAI, Frontier Alliance International. Joel Richardson, Dalton Thomas, great guys. Love those guys. Dalton's a dear friend. Haven't seen him in a while, unfortunately. We need to catch up. A dear friend, lives in Israel. Great guy. And we were in Iraqi Kurdistan together. Dalton made that happen. That is their view. I tend to disagree. As I've made clear, of course. Here's a good thing. Let me just preface it by saying to Aaron and everyone else, this is not a salvation issue. We can have different takes on prophecy and different takes on who's going to lead the Ezekiel invasion force. We're still all brothers and sisters in Christ. It's not a salvation issue. We're not denying the divinity of Christ or anything like that. So sometimes people get so heated, I think, about these issues. Are you pre-trib or post-trib? It's not a salvation issue, okay? We can differ, have a different interpretation of Scripture, but we're still all saved. We still love the Lord. We're brothers and sisters in Christ. It's all good. Let me just say that before I get the blowback. But to me, it comes down to geography as well. The Bible says, or Ezekiel says, to the uttermost north of Israel. Turkey is to the north of Israel. It's not to the uttermost north of Israel. Russia is. Meshach, Tubal, Rosh, these names are ancient, the Scythians, who were barbarians who lived in that area thousands of years ago. The Romans talked about the Scythians. They came from Russia. And Russia is at Israel. And then just in real time, look, Russia is at Israel's doorstep right now, aligned with Israel's greatest enemies. Turkey is a player, no doubt, in that force. But I believe Russia will lead it. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not perfect. But just in studying this and just kind of looking at the facts on the ground and reading Scripture, that's my take. But again, hey, God bless you. Everyone has a different take on it. It's all good. It's interesting to talk about, right? It's interesting, fascinating to talk about. So, but I do believe Turkey will be there. And, you know, Russia, Iran, and Turkey have been at each other's throats for centuries until now. for such a time as this. We've seen those photo ops the past few years of Putin and Erdogan together, along with the former president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, raising each other's arms in victory as they've met in their various capitals. So this is an unprecedented thing to see Russia, Turkey, and Iran aligned. And look, there is some fissures there. They don't agree on everything. Certainly not. They've butted heads on some things. But at the end of the day, when the rubber hits the road, they will be aligned, no doubt. Hey, we got to get going here, unfortunately. Wow, that was fun. It was great to be with you all. Hey, if you have not subscribed, if you enjoyed this today, I assume if you're watching right now that you're a subscriber. If not, hey, subscribe. Click the subscribe button, click the notification bell so you get alerts. We're posting videos every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on the weekends. Would love to have you with us as a watchman, man or woman on the wall every day here. Great being with you today. Hang in there, stay in prayer. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.